A massive crocodile dragged him into the water. The explosion of mud, the roar, the violent twisting, it all happened in seconds. The river swallowed him whole, and on the bank, 5 young lions froze in disbelief. They had never seen their father lose a fight. They had never seen him fear anything. But now he was gone, beneath the surface of a murky channel that has claimed kings before. This was the moment that shattered their world. Before that morning, the king of the eastern floodplains walked with the confidence of a god. His mane was dark, thick, brushed with the dust of battles won and territories conquered. For years, his presence alone kept rival males at bay. Hyenas scattered at the sound of his roar. Buffalo avoided his roots. Even nomadic coalitions refused to test him. But to his 5 sons, he was more than a ruler. He was anchor, teacher, shield, and future. They followed him through reed beds, across muddy tracks, into shallow river crossings. They mimicked his scent marks, studied his posture, copied the way he stalked and stared. They were not ready to rule, but under him they didn't need to be. He handled the wars, he handled the borders, he handled the enemies, until the river handled him. It was late dry season when the disaster came. The waterline had receded into narrow channels, deep, dark trenches shaded by reeds and papyrus. Crocodiles gathered there, stacked like armored fossils beneath the surface, waiting for anything desperate enough to drink. The king approached the river without hesitation. He had crossed here dozens of times. He knew the shelves and the shallows. He knew the smell of crocodiles and the sound of their bodies shifting underwater. But this time, instinct betrayed him. The eldest son flicked his tail, uncertain. Another son growled low, pacing behind him. They sensed something, but they had no voice to warn him. A king does not wait for permission from his princes. He stepped forward. The water rippled around his paws, then around his chest, then the surface erupted. A reptile the size of a buffalo lunged upward, jaws locking on the king's shoulder. He roared, twisting violently, sending waves crashing against the bank. The sons snarled and lunged from the edge, but none dared enter the deep channel. The crocodile pulled. The king resisted. Then a second shape moved beneath the surface, a tail, a roll, a surge of bubbles, and the river claimed him. The water calmed, the reeds swayed, the crocodiles vanished into the channel. The king did not resurface. For a long time, the sons did nothing. They stared at the place where he disappeared, nudging the wet sand with their paws, sniffing the churned mud as if expecting his scent to guide them. But the river does not return kings. Not here, not anywhere. They waited anyway. On the first day, they slept on the bank, flinching at every ripple. On the third day, hyenas circled, drawn by a scent only scavengers understand. The sons roared and chased them off, but the hyenas laughed and returned from downwind, patient and mocking. On the 5th day, buffalo herds thundered through the crossing, trampling the mud where their father last stood. The sons retreated into the reeds. Subadult males are no match for a wall of horns. On the 7th day, the river smelled different, a heavy odor of decay. But still they waited. Because for lions, the loss of a king is not just emotional, it is existential. Without him, there was no one to defend territory, no one to repel rival coalitions, no one to teach them how to kill buffalo or avoid hyena packs. They had strength, but no strategy, courage, but no leadership, age, but no experience. And while they clung to the riverbank, refusing to accept reality, something out in the grasslands was watching, approaching, calculating. A coalition of rival males, older,
larger, battle-tested, had smelled opportunity. The story of the 5 sons was just beginning.
For days, the 5 sons lingered along the river as if time itself was trapped in the reeds. They paced, they drank, they roared into the channel, hoping for an answer that never came back. But in the savannah, tragedy does not wait for grief to finish. News travels here, not in words, but in scents, roars, and shifting borders. And somewhere beyond the acacia groves, a coalition of older males had heard what the river had done. To them, the absence of a king wasn't a story of sorrow, it was an invitation. By the 9th day, the sons were hungry. Their ribs showed beneath their coats, their movements slowed, their tempers sharpened. A single lion can hunt, a father and sons can hunt well, but 5 inexperienced subadults without their leader? That's a recipe for failure. They tried anyway. One evening, as dust thickened in the sky, they stalked a herd of wildebeest near the floodplain edge. Their approach was messy, too much noise, too much impatience. When the herd spooked and bolted, the chase lasted barely 10 seconds before exhaustion forced them to stop. One brother collapsed onto the grass, panting. Another slapped the earth with his paw, frustrated. The eldest stared toward the river as if blaming it for everything. In a way, he was right. Meanwhile, the crocodiles did what crocodiles always do. They vanished with their secret beneath the surface, leaving no evidence except a memory. On the 12th day, something changed in the sons. Hunger forced instinct to override hope. They stood, stretched, and for the first time since the attack, they walked away from the riverbank. But they didn't go far. They circled back every night, sleeping with their backs to the reeds as if guarding a grave they couldn't see. This river had taken their father, but it was also the only familiar boundary they had left. By day 14, scavengers began to test them. Hyenas first, always hyenas. They paced just out of reach, laughing at the edge of darkness, waiting for a mistake, waiting for a wound, waiting for weakness. The brothers snarled, bluff-charged, swatted the air, whatever it took to keep the scavengers back. But hyenas are not fools. They returned every night, and each visit lasted longer. On day 16, the air carried a different scent. Musky, older, male. A rival coalition had finally arrived. 3 of them, thick-necked, scarred, heavy-jawed males in their prime. They weren't here for water. They weren't here for prey. They were here to see if the rumors were true. From a hill overlooking the channel, they scanned the floodplain, tails twitching, nostrils flaring. The 5 sons spotted them almost immediately. They froze, ears forward, hackles raised. The rival males stared down at them with the cold, assessing gaze of conquerors, eyes that weigh value, risk, and reward. The eldest son growled low, but he did not advance, because even hunger cannot hide the truth. They were subadults, and these were kings in waiting. Territory in the savannah has no sympathy for orphans. A father's death is not just a tragedy, it's a vacancy. If the rival coalition confirmed that the king was truly gone, they could take the land, take the females, and erase his lineage from the map. All 5 sons knew this. They had felt the pressure since the day the water swallowed him. So they made a choice. They would not run. Not yet. They stood in a tight line, shoulders brushing, tails stiff, staring up at the invaders with all their young bodies could muster. The rival males held their gaze for a long, uncomfortable stretch of time, and then they turned and disappeared beyond the ridge. Not retreating, not afraid, just waiting for confirmation. Because in the wild, before you take a kingdom, you make sure the king is truly dead. Night fell on day 16, heavy and silent.
The moon painted the channel in silver. The suns lay close together, ears flicking at every rustle in the reeds. They were tired, they were hungry, but worst of all, they were uncertain. They didn't know if their father was gone forever. They didn't know if the coalition would return. They didn't know if they would ever hunt together successfully again. All they knew was this: they had no leader, they had no plan, and they had enemies watching. And while they wrestled with that reality, the savannah was preparing its next move. Because the wild does not offer mercy, only consequences.
By day 17, the landscape around the river felt different. The air was still heavy with the scent of decay, but now there was something layered beneath it: territorial tension. The 5 sons moved as a unit through the tall grass, leaner now, hungrier, driven more by instinct than memory. Every hunt they attempted collapsed in confusion. They would stalk, chase, panic, then abandon the effort when coordination failed. Their father had been the conductor, the strategist, the force that transformed chaos into survival. Without him, they were 5 young lions pretending to be a pride of kings. Nightfall brought the hyenas again. This time they pushed harder, approaching in numbers, circling the brothers with confidence. The sons roared and charged, jaws snapping at the shadows, but their roars lacked the weight of a dominant male. The hyenas retreated, laughing and chittering, as if mocking the idea that these 5 orphans could hold anything of value. And in a way, the hyenas were right. Value in the savannah is measured in ownership, territory, females, food, lineage. Without those things, lions are ghosts passing through someone else's map. Day 19 arrived with wind and vultures. The sons tracked a herd of zebra grazing near a shallow pan, and for a moment it felt like opportunity had finally come. They crouched low, bellies in the dust, eyes locked on a young mare lagging behind the herd. The wind favored them, the terrain was open, but coordination, the invisible ingredient of every successful lion hunt, was missing. When they broke cover, it was too early. The zebra scattered, hooves tearing through dirt, dust exploding into the air. The eldest son chased hard, almost catching up before the zebra veered sharply and vanished into the herd. The brothers regrouped, panting, sides heaving, hunger deepening. Another failure carved into the ledger. But hunger wasn't their worst enemy. That honor belonged to the 3 males watching from the ridge. The rival coalition had returned, and they were closer now. They followed the brothers silently, studying them, gauging their strength, waiting for a moment that would confirm the rumors of the king's death. Older males do not gamble. They do not attack unless victory feels inevitable. They waited for proof. And on the 20th day, the river finally gave it to them. Downstream, beneath a curtain of reeds, the crocodiles had begun to strip away what remained of the king. Bones surfaced, carried by the current, pale and unmistakable. Vultures gathered, landing in clusters, tearing at scraps, squabbling over what the water no longer cared to hide. The rival males saw the bones, they smelled the truth, and that was enough. From that moment, everything changed. The rival coalition descended from the ridge, no longer cautious, no longer observing, but claiming. They scent-marked trees along the floodplain. They roared into the night with the deep, thunderous confidence of conquerors. Territory is not simply taken by force, it is declared by sound. And their declaration told the world, the king is gone. This land belongs to us now. The 5 sons heard those roars, and something inside them finally broke. They returned to the channel one last time, not to wait, but to say goodbye. They paced the bank in silence, touching the ground where their father had stood, staring into the water where he had vanished. There was no ceremony, no mourning ritual, just instinct and memory bound together in the quiet language of lions. Then, with hunger gnawing at their ribs and the scent of rival males thick in the air, the brothers turned away from the river that had shaped them and started walking eastward, away from the floodplain, away from the bones of their father, and away from the kingdom that no longer belonged to them. Their departure was not a retreat in the human sense, it was survival. Young males are rarely given choices in the wild. They either flee or die. They regroup or vanish. They become conquerors or they become stories. As the rival coalition took control of the floodplain, marking, roaring, chasing off hyenas, the five sons melted into the grasslands like shadows, moving with the slow, deliberate pace of lions who had lost everything but the will to keep going. The future ahead of them was uncertain. They had no territory, no experience, no allies. They had only each other. And in the brutal arithmetic of the wild, sometimes that is enough to begin again, and sometimes it isn't.
The sons traveled through unfamiliar country, following no clear path except distance from the river, from the roars of the rival coalition, and from the truth they could no longer ignore. Their coats grew dusty, their frames grew thinner, their movements grew slower, but they stayed together, 5 silhouettes moving through gold grass that swayed like waves in the wind. Around day 24, they encountered a small herd of impala near a dry creek bed. Hunger makes lions sharp, and desperation makes them bold. This time, their approach was quiet, controlled, almost disciplined. When they sprang forward, the youngest brother managed to slam an impala onto the dirt, jaws clamping around its throat. It wasn't a buffalo or a zebra or anything that could feed a pride for days, but it was food. And for the first time since the river took their father, they tasted success. They fed fast, ears flicking at every sound, muscles tense with the instinct to defend what little they had claimed. There were no hyenas here, no vultures, no rival males roaring from the ridge, just the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of insects. When the impala was finished, they lay side by side in the shade of a fallen tree, licking their paws, eyes half closed, breathing steady. For a brief moment, survival felt possible again. But the wild does not grant mercy for long. A week later, they reached the edge of a vast savanna scattered with acacias and boulders. This was contested ground, neutral territory that belonged to no single ruler for long. Nomads passed through here, and coalitions clashed here, and prides shifted like weather patterns. It was the kind of land where young males either found their path or met their end. It didn't take long for the locals to notice them. A coalition of 2 males, older than the brothers, scarred and seasoned, crossed their scent trail one morning and began tracking them with the calm confidence of lions who knew the rules of this game. When they found the 5 sons resting beneath a cluster of trees, there was no hesitation. They approached with heads low, tails stiff, issuing low growls that carried one message: leave. The 5 sons rose slowly, muscles tensed, but they didn't break formation. They stared back with the unspoken defiance of lions who had already lost too much to surrender without being forced. For several long seconds, the 2 coalitions sized each other up, the lonely orphans versus the hardened nomads. The older males roared first, a booming challenge that vibrated through the ground. The brothers responded with roars of their own, but their voices lacked the depth and confidence of seasoned fighters. The confrontation ended without blood, but the message was clear. This territory was not theirs. They moved on again, traveling under moonlight, crossing fields filled with wildebeest, skirting herds of buffalo they had no chance of bringing down, navigating the delicate boundary between caution and starvation.
Weeks passed. Their muscles filled out, their coordination sharpened. They began to hunt together, not perfectly, not like their father had taught them, but with enough competence to feed themselves. Their roars deepened, their confidence grew. They were no longer the confused sons waiting on a riverbank for a king to arise from the water. They were young nomads, learning what it meant to live without a territory, without protection, without certainty. In time, observers would say they formed a true coalition, one that understood loyalty not as a choice, but as a requirement. They would chase hyenas from kills, challenge scavengers, and learn the rhythms of the open plains. Some nights they returned to the floodplain border, standing far enough away to smell the reeds, but not close enough to challenge the males who now ruled there. That land was no longer theirs, and they knew it. Not all stories in the wild end in triumph. Some end quietly, with lions fading into the landscape, becoming shadows that wander until age catches them. Others end violently, with fights that decide the fate of lineages in seconds. And some, like the 5 sons, end with a different kind of victory: survival. They didn't reclaim their father's territory. They didn't dethrone the rival coalition. They didn't rewrite the hierarchy of the floodplains, but they endured. In a world where so many young males vanish within months of losing their king, these 5 walked on, carving their existence into land that had no obligation to accept them. Their story is not of crowns and conquest. It is of resilience, of brothers bound by loss, of lions who learned to live after the river took everything. And somewhere in the dark waters of the floodplain, beneath the reeds and the mud, the bones of the king would settle and become part of the riverbed itself. Silent proof that even the greatest rulers must one day return to the earth. The wild remembers him. His sons remember him, and the floodplains remember him. Because legends here are not written in words. They are written in territory, in blood, and in the sons who carry the memory forward, step by step, through the endless grass.